President Bola Tinubu today signed the Electoral Act Amendment Bill into law amidst a lot of controversy and agitation from opposition lawmakers. Abia Senator, former governor of Abia State, Senator Orji Uzor is lashed out to Tinubu's minister over tardiness to parliamentary duties. Hello everyone, welcome to the program and thank you for keeping a date with us tonight on today's episode of Politics Today on Channels Television. I'm Sean Joaquin Baloye right here in Abuja studio. We're leading for you tonight your major story, which is the President's assent to the Electoral Act Amendment Bill 2026, which is now law and is now going to be known as the Electoral Act 2026, which will govern going forward all our national federal elections. So we'll be getting to address some of the issues. Of course, I have another special guest on the program looking at a global issue and of local advantage and the lessons for Nigeria. But before we get talking, let me tell you that the chairman of the Senate Committee on National Security and Intelligence, Senator Yahya Abdullahi, says that the recent declaration of a national emergency on security by President Bola Tinubu must be supported with adequate funding to be effective. Senator Abdullahi made this declaration after a closed-door meeting with security and intelligence agencies during their budget defense before the committee. He notes that lawmakers will develop a strategy to ensure the President's declaration does not become merely symbolic. He adds that the committee may engage the leadership of the National Assembly to seek an audience with the President. According to him, the goal will be to present the concerns of the security and intelligence agencies directly and push for the release of funds required for them to carry out their constitutional responsibilities. And in the House of Representatives, the House Committee on National Security, Honorable Ahmad Satomi, says the budget released in the 2025 budget to national security do not align with the President's proclamation on his intent to tackle insecurity in the country. The lawmaker says that we're saying all of this during the budget defense session on national security, where he further stated that the country's security training institutions are nothing to write home about. Meanwhile, the House of Representatives has issued a 72-hour ultimatum to relevant agencies and stakeholders and concessionaires to submit all requested documents for port concession. But as that defense budget sessions were going on, there was a senator from Abia State and former governor of Abia State, Senator Orji Uzor, apparently was very upset with the attitude, according to him, tardiness and the lackadaisical attitude of some of the ministers in President Bola Tinubu's cabinet. He said it's even worse for some of those ministers who have served as lawmakers and do not take time seriously when they're coming to the National Assembly. However, he praised the security chiefs and heads of security agencies for their seriousness and their timeliness every time they had a relationship or engagement with the National Assembly. Take a listen to how the senator put it.
We invite our colleagues who left these chambers to go and be ministers. They will take 2 hours to be here. It's good to say this thing. Mr. President should take note of that, because they don't adhere to time and it's affecting our job here. Only the security committee community that keeps the time here. Other of our colleagues, when you invite them, they come in 2-3 hours and tell you they are calling the villa. And this nonsense should stop. It's absolutely rubbish, because this is a budget period. All the time I've invited in any committee, the National Security Advisor, the Director DGSSS, the Chief of Defense Staff, they are there 10 minutes ahead of me. And we should keep to this. We should take this in serious. We are not joking here. Our colleagues, some of them sat in these chambers. And they go because they are ministers. They don't want to adhere to time and rule of law. And it's disappointing. I wish I use this opportunity in Security Committee to commend you people and ask you never to go back. I was here at 20 minutes to 11, and the DGSSS was here. And all of them, they were here waiting for 11 o'clock. Our colleagues will come here 11 o'clock, they come at 3 o'clock and say they were calling the villa. Everybody knows the road to the villa. They should stop lying bluntly with the name of the president. They should come and do their job. We are doing budget hearing. They should be here to do it, for Christ's sake.
All right, then. Tonight, I will be joined by Professor Bolaji Akinyemi, former External Affairs Minister, who will be talking to us about the legacies of Reverend Jesse Jackson, who is a friend of Nigeria and a friend of a lot of Nigerians, and who died at the age of 84. Professor, thank you so much indeed for joining us tonight. Yeah. Prof, give me a moment. Let me deal with these breaking news that we have been following that came from the presidential villa, and is about the electoral amendment. Now, I'll come to you just in a moment. Give me some few minutes, sir. Today, we know that President Bola Tinubu has signed the Electoral Act 2026 into law, setting the legal framework for Nigeria's 2027 general elections, but not without significant controversy. The National Assembly passed the bill after intense deliberations with sharp divisions over Clause 60, which retains manual transmission of results as a fallback in the event of an electronic failure. Opposition lawmakers had pushed for stronger safeguards to make electronic transmission the sole basis for collation, warning that any manual alternative could undermine transparency. A division in the Senate saw 55 senators backing the proviso, while 15 voted against it. Amid the rowdy scenes and a brief closed-door sessions, there's still a passage that has happened. I will show you the faces of the 15 who voted against. I may not be able to show you the 55 who voted for, but I'll show you the the faces of the 15 senators who voted against the alternative of the option or the proviso. Well, tonight we'll be examining what has changed and in the new law and what it means for the credibility of the next general election. But let me allow you to listen to President Bola Tinubu after signing that bill into law.
It is time that we have confidence in our system. No matter how good a system is, it's managed by the people, promoted by the people, and the result is finalized by the people. In fact, for final results, you are not going to be talking to the computer, you are going to be talking to human beings who will announce the final results. And when you look at the crux of various arguments, maybe Nigeria should question our broadband capability. How technically are we today? How technically will we be tomorrow to answer the call of, either read time or no? And as long as you appear personally as a manual voter in any polling booth, but ballot paper is given to you manually, you decide in a corner and thumbprint the party of your choice, you cast your vote without hindrance and any interference. Ballots are subsequently counted manually, sorted and counted manually. It's just the arithmetic accuracy that is entered into from easy. It's still manual, essentially. And the transmission of that manual result is what we're looking at. And we need to avoid glitches. I'm glad you did. Interference, unnecessary acting in this age of, computer inquisitiveness. Nigeria will be there. We will flourish.
That's the president today, and those are his own views about what has transpired over it. Just before we go to Prof, let's get some insights into what this means. Technically speaking, operation-wise, legal-wise, I'm being joined by a former director of legal, former director public affairs, a lawyer, worked with INEC for several years. Mr. Oluwale Osaziuze, thank you so much indeed for joining us, this time physically.
Thank you for having me.
I appreciate it. You saw this coming, right? That this was going to be the end of that old debate and the back and forth.
I'm not too sure I saw this coming with such haste, almost undue haste, in the sense that I think it was transmitted to the president either yesterday or today, and today the president has signed it. Without, I'm not so sure he had the opportunity at the time to go through the bill clause by clause and to get benefit of the inputs of the Attorney General of the Federation or the other person in view of all the controversy that has surrounded the passage of that bill. I don't think there has been enough time for sober reflection and a sober consideration of the most important and the most controversial parts of that bill. I doubt if that happened.
Which will be a fear for you, isn't it?
It is a fear. It's so those who think that this was predetermined, that this is what we are going to do at the end of the day, and they just worked from answer to question, then it almost validates their position, those who had such fears, such worries.
What gives you the worry the most in all of, and I know that for you, as you're hearing those clauses, those legal language, the couching, the framing of the law, one thing that comes to your mind is how practically this will be playing out on the field. Absolutely. Because those laws, when it comes to election, is not only in the letters. Everything that you say has a meaning on the field.
Absolutely.
What is, and you followed our electoral development over the years. Yes. What are the areas, the gray areas for you in these law that's been signed by the president?
Well, let us start with the transmission of results. The president, I listened to him speak about how much of a manual process it is. That is correct. It's correct to that extent. But he's only taking one part of the process and has not juxtaposed it with the earlier part. He has not spoken about the electronic register of voters. That's not the manual. We don't have a manual register. We've gone way, way, way beyond the manual register a long time, several cycles ago. He doesn't take into consideration the beavers. He doesn't take into consideration the smart card itself. And the fact that electronically the beavers will read not just the card, but also the biometrics of the voter. Those are not manual processes. Those are electronic processes. So, yes, we do have a hybrid. And then you go to the manual process. And then that is the counting, the balloting itself, the sorting, and the counting. But we now have gone through the benefits of trying these things in the field, testing these things in the courts. And in administering these things, I've seen some of these challenges. And after each cycle, we identify the challenges and try to rectify, try to correct these things. And over the years, INEC has been at the forefront of doing this, along with partners like civil societies. So fair enough. Now, collation of results, transmission and collation have been a bottleneck, has been one of the lacuna, provides an opportunity for interference. We have seen that often
the actual is ill of electoral process.
Yes, it's taken
oftentimes
after you've gotten your ballots, you've cast your ballots, it's counted, and we know what happens in the polling units. And because of that, INEC displayed the people's results. You display the polling result there on physically. Now, between the polling unit and the collation, oftentimes there have been some little things happening and results change by the time you get to collation. At each level of collation, you see changes, you see manipulation. And it's because of this manipulation, we said, okay, let us look for a system and transmit automatically. If we transmit electronically from the polling unit, by the time the polling unit result, the physical copy comes there, The collation officer is waiting for you. The returning officer is waiting for you. He has already seen the result.
Yeah.
So he will see whether there has been a tampering with the result that you're bringing from your last, either from the polling unit or from the level of collation.
A lot of those who are arguing, maybe arguing to the, and I try as much as possible, because election and political matters sometimes can get so confusing that people don't even know what this is all about.
Yes.
And I think some of the lawmakers are missing the point.
Absolutely.
The reason why people are agitating for the electronic transmission to be compulsory without any other option is for the issue of transparency and accountability.
Absolutely.
The Form EC8A is enough legally, is enough for the process of recording the result. I mean, but beyond that, I mean, it suffices. Yes. But people feel that a lot of the times in darkness, people manipulate, people will write results. But when they can see, it gives some level of confidence that anyone who wins, it's not like IRF is going to win us any trophy, yes, or is going to make our election with a magic wand, just all of a sudden makes it better. But people are saying, we want to be able to see. We want to be able to... Good that it's been... IRF is empowered by law. Now, the difference from the Electoral Act of 2022, that's a major difference. But is it that they are missing, or they are not getting the point, or there is a mischief that they are all about? They're not getting... Because we've moved past... Technology is not our problem. That has been done, dusted, dealt with. No. Anybody arguing about technology and infrastructure is arguing an old conversation. The conversation is about transparency and accountability. Or am I missing anything here?
I don't think you are. Regrettably, I heard the president mention something like that, alluded to that. And that is what some of the senators who were opposed to transparency alluded to. And they forget, or mischievously, they don't recall that we have passed that stage. That in the 9th Assembly, in the 8th Assembly, INEC went to defend its position about transmission and the capability and the spread of coverage. Then the NCC, which is the body charged with that legally, came and said we had more than 93% coverage. A technical committee was set up between INEC and the NCC. Dr. Lecky was the representative co-chair of that committee. And that committee came up with a report. I was a member of that committee. And actually one for Dr. Stringwell is still alive. He was the one who was the director of ICT, was leading the technical part of the INEC to that committee. And they gave us figures, they gave us things to show that with 2G, 3G, and 4G, as at that time, I'm talking of 8 years ago, there was more than 93% coverage. And provisions could be made for those blind spots. Those are the technical people charged with that responsibility constitutionally, legally, statutorily. And they're telling us this. We've not heard anything from the NCC today. What
is your fear about the provisor? What does he... I mean, Mike Guinea is on this program.
It makes nonsense of the whole thing. Because we are back to the dark days of the incident forms.
And you know, you and I have when you were in INEC, we've had this conversation. And when people were ballot stuffing, people were doing all manner of rubbish in our electoral process because of incident form. Just any little problem, they revert to incident form. Any little problem.
But they don't wait for a problem to happen. In many instances, they just went and said incident form.
Because the law allows for it.
Allowed for it. It was a good idea, but the abuse of it was the challenge. It was a good idea to say, look, anybody who has a voter's card who turns out should be allowed to vote, even if he doesn't have any fingers or thumb and or his biometrics is not, or the soft card is not able to capture his biometrics. That was the idea.
And what people are not getting again, sir, is the fact that the difficulty, because the onus to prove, the burden of proving election irregularity is on the man who is saying there is irregularity, not on the INEC who is conducted. And a lot of people have said, let INEC have the burden of proving that he conducted a good election. If that is not happening, the bottlenecks as a lawyer for proving that there is irregularity has to be done every polling unit. You have a short window to be able to prove that. And people don't understand also the fact that when you capture the polling unit result, if it's tampered with, it takes a long time for you to be able to prove it in court. And that's why people are saying, let us see what is there. Let us have our record. Let the citizen, it's a citizen's tool if people don't get it.
You hit the nail on the head. It's almost impossible, quite honestly. I'll give you an example. The latest we have, and the Supreme Court has validated that exercise, was that of Edo, the last 2024. And the petitioners tendered 3 different results in many polling units, all 3 certified by INEC. The first was the EC8A, the one you gave my party agent. It was certified. Then you had the one from the Beaver, the IREV. It was certified. In most cases, they tended to tally. In some cases, they did not. Then you had a third one, the one that was used for collation of the results, certified. You can only have 1 certified true copy of an original document. All 3 should read the same thing, but it did not. But still, because of the standard and the onus of proof, it was still left with the petitioner, and the court say you should call them from each polling unit. So in a presidential election, if you have problems with 20,000 units, you're going to call 20,000 people, and you have less than 6 months after filing that to prove that. It's
legally speaking.
It's an
procedurally
it's an
in court. Yeah.
Even though the act has said, look, documents certified by the commission should speak for themselves to show irregularities, even on the face of it. But they said no. In that kind of case, for example, with 3 different results, the owners ought to have shifted or be on the commission to say, hey, what happened? Which is the correct result? The correct result is not necessarily the one that was used for transmission. Justify it. The one you transmit from the polling ordinarily ought to be the genuine result we should believe, because you did it immediately after the results were declared.
All right. I mean, there are a few things, and as a lawyer, I know that your eyes will be very much interested. And I mean, I'm also learning also to look more into details of some of this legal language. Well, after this, if the provisor that has been set there has captured the mischief that those who input it have served after this election, maybe in the next amendment we would have been able to settle it and fix it properly. But there are major fears. And I say again, in 2022, I said it, that political parties need to get consultants to study electoral act as it's amended. If not, they're going to have problem. The same thing here. First, the amendment has shown that INEC funds will be released to INEC at least 6 months, different from the previous window of 1 year.
Yes.
And we know what happened last election cycle, and they had problem because funds didn't come to it early enough.
Yes.
And it caused logistical problems.
I don't know what could have justified that.
They were shrinking the timelines.
Yes, but...
And all the timelines were not considering the end implication of this.
I believe they knew, because in the Ninth Assembly, this was discussed. Before all these amendments were done, the previous amendments were done, these things were discussed. You need money to plan. The way it is now, not only, with the Procurement Act, for example, not only must you have a budget for those funds, the funds must have been released to you before you can complete the procurement process. So unless you have those funds in your account, you cannot place orders. Let's say Beavers, for example. You cannot place those orders. You can plan for it, you can prepare for it, but you cannot place those orders or advertise that give a contract for the award if you do not have the funds in your coffers.
INEC is under pressure now.
Absolutely.
6 months. Correct. If the funds, we're talking about 2025 budget not properly implemented, not so released.
Yes.
And this is happening again. There's another problem, Mr. Uzi. Now for voter registration, you will need, in the new provision, birth certificate, Nigerian passport, and NIN. They've removed national ID card and driver's license. That has been removed from that list. And a lot of people have national ID. Driver's license is one of the most popular means of identification.
Yes.
That is not the only one. Voters can download their voter card from INEC's website. The implication is that this may increase voter participation and reduce disenfranchisement, which is a good one.
Yes.
But one area that I would love a lot of the political
be careful,
parties
because I don't want people to download things and say, I downloaded, this is what I downloaded. It means that you have brought a fake thing to the place.
Yeah.
But it's a good provision, ordinarily.
Yes.
Ordinarily.
So you don't have to wait for your PVC to be printed and wasted PVC that are thrown in the gutters and wasting money. But the mode of primaries, only direct primaries and consensus are recognized. Indirect primaries have been removed. Internal party politics.
Because in the bill that was debated after the public hearings and everything, prior to the 2002 Act, were only 2 options, direct and indirect.
Direct, yeah.
It was in their wisdom that they brought this issue of consensus.
Yeah.
So now you remove one that was recommended before, and I'll put what is consensus in a democracy?
It looks like a confusion to me because when they should have just left it.
And in practice, you know what consensus means.
Yes.
There's an arm twisting, and because the governor, the president, or somebody powers that be wants a particular person say, arrive at a consensus, oh, promise you will do this for you, or they blackmail you into submission.
Mr. Uzi, if you are to talk to Nigerian people tonight about this provision and the expectation for the election, what would you say?
Let me speak personally. A lot of people are disillusioned, and it's going to be very difficult to rebuild confidence. And since 2023 and earlier, what we have been advocating is that let us do everything that we can to build confidence. Some people recall we're here and people are destroying their PVCs and they don't have faith in the system. So the onus was on us to try to ensure that people are there, people have confidence, and these are some of the things that we have given us confidence. It sounds almost like a betrayal, a letdown. Actually, when we took 1-2 steps forward and we're taking so many steps backwards, it's a bit of a disappointment. But we will have to meet them. We will have to. If we are going to have democracy, we have to work at it. We have to be eternally vigilant. And I guess we now have to sit down, re-strategize, and insist that take other measures that will ensure that the people's votes count. Because my worry about that proviso now, what happens if signals are jammed? What happens if the presiding officer is compromised and tells you, it's subjective, and say, I could not upload the result? So ultimately, you go back and say, okay, he said he could not upload, so we'll take the manual. And that manual could have been tampered with.
Mr. Oluwole Osazuruzi, thank you so much. It's always a pleasure, and I appreciate the knowledge and the insights you shared tonight. Thank you so much indeed.
Thank you.
Professor Bolaji Akinyemi, an erudite scholar and a former External Affairs Minister who has been standing by for us. Thank you so much for your patience, Prof. Tonight we're reflecting on the life and the influence and enduring legacy of American civil rights leader Jesse Jackson, a man whose activism reshaped minority political participation in the United States and expanded the frontiers of democratic inclusion. From marching alongside Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. to mounting historic presidential bids and building the Rainbow Coalition, Reverend Jesse Jackson transformed protest into political power. But beyond America, what does his journey teach emerging democracies like Nigeria about inclusion, coalition building, and moral leadership in politics? Tonight, former Minister of External Affairs who have a direct personal relationship with Reverend Jesse Jackson, is a diplomat. Professor Bolaji Akinyemi was a former External Affairs Minister and a political scientist. Is live for us on the program tonight. Prof, it's a pleasure having you on the program.
Thank you for having me on your program.
Thank you, sir. Well, I mean, what we're about to discuss about the lifetimes and legacy of Jesse Jackson is about struggle, political understanding, knowledge, getting minority views into the fray of public and national discourse. And I'll try to get your view on the argument, the agitation, and eventuality of the Electoral Act amendment. They say that the majority will have their way, but the minority will have their say. What do you think about the dynamics of all of these in a Nigerian context?
I came not really to pay tribute to Jesse Jackson. I came to celebrate him. And he is, to some extent, interrelated with the question that you have just raised. For in the past 2-3 days, what people have been concentrating on has been his contribution in the United States. With your permission, what I'd like to talk about, because that has been ignored, is what Nigeria meant to him, because we're now talking in terms of past tense. What Nigeria meant to him. What I meant to him, and what Africa meant to him. Now, unknown to a lot of people,
Thanks so much, everyone, for staying with us. Let's get back to Professor Bolaji Akinyemi. Prof, you were explaining the significance of the legacy, and you said you're going to be celebrating him rather than mourning his passing.
And I showed up Nations Annual General Assembly, and I found out that Reverend Jesse Jackson was turning up at every event that Nigeria was holding at the United Nations. Now, the interesting thing was he was not doing this for every country. It was just Nigeria. And then he also sought to get me involved with activities of the Nigerians, of the Africans in the diaspora. Of course, I had to point out to him that as a foreign minister, protocol dictates that there are some events that, I couldn't associate myself with. And that's when he explained to me that Nigeria was key to what the black race became in the world. Not just the African race, not just the Nigerians in the diaspora, but the black race. And that the success of Nigeria was intertwined with the success of the black race in the world. If you understand that, then you will understand why he became part and parcel of the Nigerian foreign policy establishment. He approached me just before I left New York to come back home and said he would like to visit the whole of the countries in Southern Africa. Could we make a plane available to him? So I got in touch with President Babangida, and I explained to him that this was part of what I would call soft diplomacy, in the sense that wherever that plane landed, as long as a Nigerian plane, it will be evidence of Nigerian involvement, not just Jesse Jackson involvement. Of course, IBB agreed, and we made a Boeing 707, one of the planes we had in the fleet, available to him, as well as some of our officers. And of course, we funded the trip, and he went on a round trip to the southern African countries. And the feedback that we got was that this was kudos, not just for Jesse Jackson, not for the United States, but for Nigeria as well. And you recall there was an interview that Nelson Mandela did with a Nigerian journalist, where Mandela repeated that mantra that if the black race was going to make it, it will be because Nigeria has made it. I wasn't there, but I can swear that Jesse Jackson planted that saying in Mandela's mind. Mandela was president of South Africa. He didn't pick his own country, he picked Nigeria. And from then on, I saw evidence of the identification of Jesse Jackson with Nigeria. When we had the problem of Boko Haram, Jesse Jackson came to Nigeria. In fact, every time he came to Nigeria, I met with him. We bonded. And he said to me, look, America had problem in Iraq, America had problem in Syria, that Jesse Jackson went there and got hostages released by these two countries. Why can't I facilitate his getting hostages released by the Boko Haram in Nigeria? And I had to, I'm a political scientist, Jesse Jackson was not, but I carefully explained to him that Boko Haram was a non-state actor, whereas the leaders he was dealing with were state actors. And to that extent, he would not have access to Boko Haram, even if he wanted to, and that it wouldn't be possible. Of course, there was some element of competition. Tony Blair had his own foundation, also that were competing with the Jesse Jackson Foundation about getting these hostages released and getting the kudos for it. So Jesse Jackson invested part of his political career in Nigeria. He was part of us in Adeco. Yes, the President of the United States had appointed him a special envoy for democracy. But that was just, if you like, a cover for him to be involved in the June 12th struggle in Nigeria. And to show you how he paid particular attention, at least to me, whenever we were in the United States demonstrating, he would ask me to please stand aside and not be arrested by the police, the Washington police. He said because he could be arrested, he was an American citizen, and it will make no difference. He's been arrested all his life for civil rights and so on. But that if I were to be arrested, it will go into my record, and the Americans may not allow me to come back into the United States. So he took that particular interest, not only in me, but on other Nigerians as well, and in our struggle. I think that he has done extremely well for Nigeria, and I think we should remember him for that.
Those are fond memories, and a lot of Nigerians may not even know how deeply involved Reverend Jesse Jackson was in the Nigerian struggle and democratic struggle. But, Prof, you see, Jesse Jackson moved from street activism to presidential politics. In Nigeria, activism often remains outside formal power, and there is always a difficulty in that transition on how to make the street activism that translates those virtues into governance and what really matters to the average person. What are we getting wrong about converting protest movement into lasting political influence?
It's wrong. It is the environment that is different. The political environment in the United States, in fact, if you like, starting from the period when the United States launched its war against Britain for their own emancipation, had always gone from street protests until people ended up in Congress, or people ended up in state assemblies and what have you. With us also, recall that our initial leaders in this country, Sardauna, Aminu Kano, Awolowo, Azikwe, Mazim Bono Ajige, they also started on the streets as activists, even though we didn't call them activists, I've forgotten what we called them, but they were activists. We were fighting for our independence. But the moment, and it has become what I will call, maybe that is where you are saying, where did we get it wrong? The moment our leaders get to power, they hold on to it. They hang on to it. But then that also is not peculiar to Nigeria. In Great Britain, you had people who were in parliament for donkey years. Even in the United States, you had people who were in power, who were in Congress for donkey years. But what had happened was the Americans haven't seen that had problems of its own. They had term limits. After Rockefeller? No, not Rockefeller. Roosevelt. During the Second World War, they then had term limits. We also have now brought in term limits on our own. But you are right that our leaders tend to hold on, whether as godfathers who would then not get along with God's sons and will have this trouble. Maybe it's part of our culture.
The Nigerian political environment today, with its ethnic divisions, party structures, and electoral challenges, would his style of mobilization succeed, or would the system neutralize him?
No, the system. We must accept that our culture has the problem of derailing our leaders, people who have visions for our country. Because in addition to having this, I've forgotten the language that I used. We also have rotation. It's my turn, Milokan. It's the turn of the Fulanis, it's the turn of the... We also have this. And that, to me, is not allowing us to grow. Because when you get a good leader, but he has served his 2 terms, you have to now move on to another part of the country. Even if you have excellent candidates from the same area where the initial president had come from, you have to move on to another place. Although it is not written into our law, but it has become part of our tradition. And I really would want us to move away from that. Let us admit that rotation is a weakness in our political system.
Issues to discuss: ethnicity and religion. But there are strong consideration if you want to make sense of the cultural and the ethnic complexities of our country today. How do we balance the equation? For someone who knows the military very well, and you've also understudied the democratic and the civilian nuances in our nation, how do we balance? Because now we've started, the North has had some time, the South is having some time, and those who say merit over all of these issues. But they're still very, very sensitive. Even in America, issues of religion is very core, is at the core of their politics. How do we balance it, Prof?
No, sorry. Religion is not at the core of American politics. I regard Trump as he's just a specialty in the politics of the United States. It's a peculiarity. It's not typical of American politics. Last week, we spent most of last week celebrating General Murtala Mohammed. Now, but we have forgotten that Murtala Mohammed was a military man who came out of a military establishment and who operated within a military environment. And that's why he was so successful. if Murtala had been operating in a civilian political environment as we have now, the opposition would have been trying to drag him down all the time, and we would not have had, something to celebrate the way we had him. It must have occurred to Nigerians that why is it that the only person we have celebrated with such, fervor has been a military man. We've had Azikwe, we've had Sardauna, we have had Chief Awolowo, and yet their celebration had been limited to their locality. Murtala is the only national hero that we have celebrated. Something must be related to the environment in which he operated. That is what our think tanks should be thinking about. How can we replicate that without getting back to a military regime? How can we, replicate that environment that allows us to grow heroes that can be national in outlook and that we can all celebrate? But right now, since 1999, tell me who have been national heroes that we can say had no weaknesses that that will say, oh, there are buts and ifs and everything. We must be able to interrogate that. We must.
I look at it, Prof, and Jackson's Rainbow's coalition was one that one need to learn. I mean, look at the influence and the big lesson to learn and how it has united minorities in the United States. Labor groups came together, marginalized community came into understanding how viable a political bloc could be when they air their voice. Why has coalition building in Nigeria often been transactional rather than ideological? And what does that say about the maturity of our democracy?
Of course, the foundation of our democracy was faulty. Often we don't like to talk about that. The British did not really plant solid democratic foundation. I mean, look, we became independent in 1960. Until the last minute, the Governor General, who was British, could veto any legislation that was coming out of our House of Representatives. The governors at the regional levels had problems with our politicians until the last minute when they left. So when exactly did we have the time to practice democracy before the British left? We didn't. And then when they left us with this truncated system. In the 1950 Ibadan Congress, they had simply allocated seats to regions without ever counting us. We've never had census that could say we all embraced and we all sanctified. No, we simply allocated that population to ourselves. So it is that truncated form of foundation to our democracy that is part of the problem that we are faced with. Political parties on the eve of independence were all tribal-based. The NPC from the north, the Action Group from the west, and the SNC from the east. They were all tribal-based political parties. How could you build on that and think that that foundation for democracy will be solid? We are going to, I don't know how we will do it, okay? I'm 84, I'm old, I'm on my way out. already in the waiting room. But Nigeria is going to have to revisit the foundation of its political system if we are going to get it right. The reason the United States was able to have this kind of transition we've been talking about is when Italians left Italy to go to America, they became Americans. When Nigerians even left Nigeria to go to the United States, they became Americans. But when they come back home, you come back to your tribal base. So that's the thing.
Professor Bolaji Akinyemi, always a pleasure having you talk to us. It's a pleasure having you have this conversation about Jesse Jackson and his legacies. Thank you so much indeed for your time tonight.
For having me.
For being part of this conversation. I'm Sean Wakimale. God bless Nigeria.